welcome to this jazz guitar lesson. I'm Chris Whiteman and thanks for joining me. In today's lesson we're going to look at how to build and how to practice swing eighth notes. This is probably the most important lesson that I've done so far, and it's also the lesson that will probably be the most overlooked, simply because this stuff doesn't sound that exciting. But if you're an aspiring jazz guitarist and you've ever played a melody, or you've transcribed a phrase and you're playing the right notes but it still doesn't sound right, it doesn't sound jazzy, it's probably because your swing eighth feel is off. So I'm going to give you an example now of the same phrase played two different ways. I'm going to play it first with straight eighths, and then I'm going to play it with swing eighths. So here's the phrase with straight eighths. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? And here's the same phrase played with swing eighths. 1, 2, 3, 4. So same notes, but a very different time feel. So the difference between the straight eighth and the swing eighth is that the straight eighth note is an even division of the quarter note. It's 1 and 2 and 3 and, right? So it has kind of a rigidity to it. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying one is better than the other, but in the context, of swing music, we've got to play swing eighth notes, otherwise it's not going to sound right. So again, the straight eighth is an even subdivision, 1 and 2 and the swing eighth note is actually a derivative of a triplet subdivision, which is an odd subdivision of the beat. And I'm going to give you a little story about my first educational experience about swing eighth notes in jazz rhythm. So this was, must have been the mid to late 90s. I would drive from Richmond, Virginia. I'd drive to New York City to study with a jazz pianist named Mike Longo. And Mike was Dizzy Gillespie's musical director and his pianist for almost 30 years, from the late 60s until Dizzy died. Mike was his pianist and musical director, as well as kind of a legendary jazz educator in New York City. Guys like Ron Carter were studying with Mike Longo. So I was very excited to get this opportunity to study with him. I was very green, very little experienced, and I remember, going up there, and I went to his apartment. I think it was on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and I go there, and he says, "All right, why don't you play something for me?" And I think I played Tenderly, and he sat there. He was kind of a gruff guy, and he said, I think you have some potential. He says, "Well, put your guitar away." I said, "Put my guitar away," and he handed me a conga drum, and he said, "If you don't understand African rhythm, you're never gonna really be able to play jazz." I had no idea what he was talking about, but based on his reputation, I was eager to hear what he had to say. So he handed me this drum, and we spent the rest of the lesson basically playing 6/8 patterns, right? And I can look at it now and say basically what he was doing, he was teaching me about the subdivision of the quarter note, right? So in jazz, the quarter note is the pulse, right? It's how we count a tune off. It's what the bass player plays primarily. If they're walking, they're playing quarter notes. Do 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 do, right? I count a tune off. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So that's the primary pulse, and then but underneath that is a subdivision that's going on, and this is the key. So if I'm feeling the pulse, right? That's the tempo. Right? So I have to know what that pulse is. But what Mike was teaching me was to subdivide with triplets, right? He was calling it 6/8. He was really looking at this evolution of African rhythm. I'm going to condense it to Western education, we're going to call it the triplet subdivision. So each quarter note is getting a division of 3 pieces, right? Da, 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 da. So this is the important concept to understand, is that we have 2 rhythmic elements that we have to be aware of. We have to be aware of the primary pulse, which is the quarter note, and we also have to be feeling the triplet subdivision underneath that pulse. Da, 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 da. And I was doing that on hand drums. You don't have to do that. I'm going to give you some exercises today to work on the guitar. So when we look at a triplet subdivision, what we're looking at is a division of each quarter note into 3 equal pieces, and we call those partials, right? So each subdivision gives us 3 partials. Da, 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 da. So it's from this triplet subdivision that we actually get our swing eighth notes. And so the first thing we have to do is we have to be really good at playing triplets, right, and feeling triplets. And so with the triplet, we have 3 attacks per quarter note. Da, 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 right? For the swing eighth, it's a derivative of this. So all we do is we actually combine the first 2 partials into 1 attack, and then we retain the 3rd partial as a separate attack. So it's da, 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 da. So what happens is that actually the first eighth note of a swing eighth note is twice as long as the second eighth note, right? Whereas an even eighth note, it's divided evenly in half. So the ratio of a swing eighth note is actually 2 to 1. The first attack is twice as long as the second. Now this is uneven, right? This uneven division is what creates that forward motion and that sense of swing, right? So da, da, da. So this 3rd partial kind of pushes into the downbeat of the next beat. Now luckily, when we notate swing eighth notes, we don't have to do triplets. All we have to do is write regular eighth notes and just notate, at the beginning of the music, swing or swing feel, and that will let us know that we need to be playing swing eighth notes. Now let's look at some exercises to practice the swing eighth note feel. And the point of this is we want to reflex the swing eighth note feel so that even on a bad day, when we go to play eighth notes, they're coming out swinging. All right, so the first exercise, we're just going to play quarter notes. But as I play the quarter note, I want to feel the triplet subdivision underneath. And this will be very helpful if you have a metronome. I'm using my trusty Dr. Beat, the DB66. I've probably had this for 25 years. This actually has a triplet subdivision. So if I want to do it at 80 beats per minute. So here's the quarter note. 1, 2, 3, 4. I have a little fader here. I can slide in the triplet subdivision so I can feel that underneath. And I'm just going to play a 2-octave major scale, feeling that triplet subdivision. 2, 3, 4. Now, the second step is playing that triplet. So I'm actually going to do the same 2-octave scale and just play triplet subdivision. But I'm going to give a slight accent to all the downbeats so we still feel the quarter note pulse. I'm accentuating that quarter note pulse by giving a little bit of an accent to every downbeat. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's something you can do for an extended period of time. You can do it on one note. You can do it on, you can play arpeggios that way, any scale you want. You can do chromatic scale, melodic minor, harmonic minor, doesn't matter. The idea is that we just want to start to reflex that triplet subdivision. And the third step is we convert the triplets to swing eighths, right? So we combine the first 2 partials into 1 attack. And this is our swing eighth. And it's going to sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, one additional thing I want to mention about swing eighth notes. When we are practicing them with the metronome, or we are playing a line in unison with other musicians, the swing eighth notes are very precise, right? They're metronomic in a sense, right? Especially if we're playing lines with other people, everyone's eighth notes need to feel the same. So in a horn section in a big band, if there's 5 saxes, everyone's swing eighths need to be the same so that it sounds cohesive, right? Now, as a soloist, if I'm improvising, I have more wiggle room, more freedom to be expressive with my swing eighth notes. They don't have to be metronomic. In fact, swing eighth notes are almost like your fingerprint. They're a unique identifier. So if you listen to Dexter Gordon, versus Clifford Brown, very different eighth note feels, right? Dexter Gordon very laid back, Clifford Brown really right on the beat. So one of the things I recommend is searching and seeking out players whose time feel you like, and then you transcribe and play along, and that will help cultivate that. For me, I was obsessed with George Benson. I thought he had such a great swing eighth note feel. I spent a lot of time transcribing him and playing along, and that really helped me develop my time feel. So I would encourage you to transcribe and play along with players that you really like, so that you can absorb the quality of their swing eighth notes into your own playing. All right, thanks so much for joining me. I hope you found this information useful, and I will see you next time.